This is Climate Watch. I'm Zha Daojiong. Welcome to the show. The rapid rise of AI has triggered an unexpected surge in energy demand, along with increasing greenhouse gas emissions. In China, part of the solution is taking shape far from the country's eastern tech hubs. In the high-altitude regions of Xizang Autonomous Region, new data centers are harnessing cold temperatures, clean energy, and even waste heat to reduce the carbon footprint of AI computing. These projects are part of China's broader Eastern Data, Western Computing strategy, which shifts energy-intensive computing tasks to the country's western regions where renewable energy resources are more abundant. So how green are these high-altitude data centers? Can efficiency gains keep pace with AI's rapidly growing energy demand? And what does this digital transformation mean for Xizang itself? For these questions and more, we are joined by Zha Daojiong, Professor of International Political Economy at the School of International Studies at Peking University. Professor Zha, it's great to have you on our show.
Thank you.
So first of all, what advantages do high-altitude regions like Xizang offer when it comes to data centers?
Well, I'm not an engineer when it comes to such topics, but I have been to Guizhou on a couple of occasions, and the data centers hosted there have at least 1 decade of history, and then you have major Chinese companies, including some foreign companies that hold a data center there. My understanding of hosting a data center at a high altitude region like Xizang, or for that matter, in English, they often refer to that as Tibet, is that it's energy saving because the weather is more temperate, and then throughout the year, you have regions there, specific spots there that do not get overly hot, and data centers by nature consume a lot of energy and it can become overly heated.
The Yajiang 1 Computing Center uses an innovative solar power plus waste heat recovery plus high-efficiency cooling system. Can you walk us through how this mechanism works?
Solar power is clean and easier to operate than conventional forms of power, but solar power faces the challenge of transmission to consumption centers. So by hosting a data center in Xizang, I would think it makes perfect sense in terms of generating the electricity that's clean and efficient, but without having to invest in power transmission. And then waste heat and other forms of energy that's locally available. And the cooling, again, I'm not an engineer, but then this, as I said earlier, combined with the more temperate weather or temperature systems there, it would be highly energy saving, more energy saving than other parts of the country. And then through these cable lines, which are, proven to be efficient in transmitting data back and forth. This is a classic example of efficiency maximization when it comes to the use of electricity for powering data centers. China is fortunate in being able to do this.
Okay, but what about the water usage? Because we know data centers around the world are increasingly criticized for their water consumption. But does the cold climate in Xizang significantly reduce the need for water-based cooling systems?
Cooling systems using water does mean that the same water can be reused again. Now, when people talk about the competition in consumption of water, that usually refers to the competition between diverting the water that's often needed or that is needed for daily consumption, especially by population centers. Whereas here, that creates a competition or water for irrigation. Whereas in Xizang, where it's very lightly, and in some parts of the autonomous region, you would have no population in some parts of Xizang. So in this case, the competition between water for cooling and water for other purposes is not as sharp, at least, or in some cases, not existent. And the bottom line here is that it's water that's diverted for this use, but it's not water that's going to be wasted.
Okay, and also traditionally data centers treat heat as a kind of waste, but as we know, this Yajiang project, it has this waste heat recovery system where this heat is replacing thousands of tons of coal for heating nearby buildings and facilities. But can this model be scaled up to provide low carbon heating for homes or industry?
Certainly. Chinese industries have been good at doing this. I know of a case in the Shandong Peninsula, whereby heat that's generated, that is a byproduct from nuclear power generation, and then that heat is treated, and then it's transported some 100 kilometers away from the reactor, that being nuclear, and then to power the heating for at least 3 million homes now. That replaces the coal that's needed, I think, by the magnitude of millions of tons a year. So this is just what I'm really trying to say, is that for Chinese engineers and energy companies to use the heat efficiently without having to turn to coal, this is just handy.
Okay, and also we are hearing that this center could save 320 million kilowatt hours of electricity and cut 280,000 tons of carbon emissions each year. But any idea what baseline are these savings being measured against?
Well, here in China, this baseline for such measurements in terms of relative carbon emissions, for the kilowatts hours of electricity saved, the baseline is often coal-based power generation. And in that case, of course, you have different types of coal, and then the amount of coal would be used differently. But whether or not you have a coal-fired power plant, that's what's called below critical, or supercritical. And in China, we have more and more of these supercritical generators. But the bottom line is that it's measurable, that solar power can be an effective and measurable replacement of coal-fired power.
Yes, but we know that AI is extremely energy intensive. So are these efficiency gains enough to offset the rapid growth in demand?
Well, demanding electricity does not just come from AI, although AI and the energy challenge is often highlighted. And there are lots of extended issues involved, and as I mentioned before, it's location specific. If you think about growth in demand for quality electricity, it's not just AI, it's precision engineering, and both of you are comfortably sitting in Beijing right now, but for our homes, we're not comfortable enough, in the sense that we still use LNG, which is or other forms of gas, to satisfy our daily cooking needs. Imagine a situation when, district by district here in Beijing, we can replace the energy for household cooking with electricity. That demand would be very, very high and very, very steady as well. So let's not, what I'm really trying to say is that growth in demand, however rapid in AI, is a fact of life. But number one, AI itself, including the chips that are produced, may become there's certainly a business case for encouraging less energy-intensive AI products, the chips, beginning with chips and data center that form the bulk of the data centers. And then another important point is not to let such concerns about AI-driven energy demand be demonized. After all, AI, when it's properly managed and sufficiently regulated, does serve a larger economic and social purpose.
Okay. And I think there's another issue because we know high altitude ecosystems are often quite fragile. So do we fully understand the environmental impact of large data centers in these regions? Like we're building these projects, these factories, facilities there. Is there a risk that we're shifting environmental pressure from cities to these more remote and more vulnerable areas?
Any human activity has an environmental impact or footprint. We're not really having to choose between a rock and a hot place, but comparatively, what other alternatives do you have? Do you situate AI centers closer to urban areas? That would be, in terms of water, in terms of power, a direct competition. So I think it's relative. And the core point here is let's leave these to the regulators, to the project designers, and encourage them to minimize environmental impact, also encourage them to invest in environmental protection wherever they see the most optimal or second optimal sites are for these AI centers.
Yeah, and also could large-scale computing affect local microclimates, even in these cold regions? Like, could it cause some certain level of warming in these regions?
Certainly, it's imaginable. As I said before, every human action has an impact. But again, everything is relative. I do believe such concerns should be put in perspective.
Okay, and we know these centers are primarily processing data for Eastern China, but to what extent does Xizang itself benefit? Like, do they actually contribute to local digitalization? And for instance, can AI also help support things like ecosystem monitoring in the region?
Certainly. Actually, if anything, Xizang traditionally has been one of the pioneering sites for testing what today we call AI, but in the good old days we call telecommunications or ICT, information communication technologies, in part because of precisely because of the concerns about reaching to the difficult and far-flung localities, and in terms of weather, in terms of the change in temperatures, to have these gears meet the test of the extreme weather patterns change, or even the frequent landslides in some part of the country. Those landslides still you have power cables strong enough to minimize the damage. So Xizang benefits. There is no doubt about it. And it has been a tradition here in China, as I said, to test out some of the equipments in that region.
Yes, and actually this is part of China's Eastern data, Western computing strategy. Can you tell us more about that? Like, what is the thinking behind this national plan?
This data gathered in the East and then computed, basically meaning analyzed and processed in the West, is precisely a energy saving strategy. The point one. Point two is data centers are also businesses. And by having these data centers registered in Xizang or other parts of southwestern China, it's also a way to ensure that local governments have a steady stream of revenue. And certainly, this would also help increase employment in the local areas.
Is high altitude or cold climate computing a scalable global solution, or is it just something limited to specific geographies?
To what extent this can be scalable abroad, the decision is in the hands of industry and legal regulators abroad. Different societies place different values, and of course, mind you, here in China, due to our industrial capacity and also our track record of investing in long-distance transmission of both electricity and data, we can do it. But in other societies, I would think, as I said before, number one, it's a matter of regulation. And number two, it would be require a associated capacity in building the transmission systems in those countries or localities.
Yeah, and also in climate science, we often see that making a process more efficient can kind of make it cheaper, and that in turn leads to greater overall use of it. But is there a risk that by making AI or these data centers in Xizang more efficient, we could actually accelerate AI demand to the point that it offsets the carbon savings?
Green AI is efficient, but then the degree of the green is associated with many issues, the head source of the power generation and the layout and the actual designs of how an AI center runs, and frankly speaking, the continuous monitoring and upgrade of energy consumption, monitoring of the consumption, and then improvement in operations. AI can be accelerated in this way because it's cheaper. Otherwise, businesses won't do it. Nobody would pay for that. But whether or not this can offset carbon savings, and if that carbon savings is relative to, is measured against similar scale of AI deployment, that's one way of doing it. But if you measure that against a carbon savings from other industries or the broader socioeconomic context, I don't quite see the connection. But in terms of project-based assessment, yes, green AI is a net win.
Well, I mean, there's really a lot of debate right now about the climate impact of AI and data centers. Just how green can AI really be? Like, do you think they can become net zero in the future or even climate positive? What would it take to get there?
Net zero and climate positive, these remain on the books of climate science. In laboratory contexts, anything can be achieved. But I would think the impact of AI, especially the data centers, differs from one society to another. Again, as I have heard from associating with professionals who work on this, the kind of energy intensity that's associated with today's AI data processing, there is room and there are efforts as well to reduce energy intensity. I would think, as a rule of the thumb, the workable or actionable policy choice and industry choice is to move towards net zero and climate positive rather than making net zero or climate positive a precondition.
Okay, but I mean, what you believe we can do at the current stage to work towards this goal?
At current stage, we should try to adopt the most energy efficient sets of equipment along each and every stage of the way, point one. Point two is in the laying the cables, construction of the site and operations, make updated regulations and strictly enforce them. And of course, all these come with investment, and then make timely adjustments to future deployment plans.
Okay, thank you, Professor Zha Daojiong of International Political Economy at the School of International Studies at Peking University. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for more on China's Eastern Data Western Computing Strategy, Vivian Nunes spoke with Lin Boqiang, Dean of the China Institute for Studies in Energy Policy at Xiamen University.
As we heard, more and more data centres are being relocated to Western China. What more can you tell us about that decision and the context given the environment there and the clean energy?
Well, it's because one is cheap. You are going to build a data center next to a large wind and solar base. And that wind and solar in the West can provide very cheap energy for the data center. The other one is the natural cooling system. On average, at about 10 months, the temperature there can maintain about 8 degrees Celsius. And that is really going to save a lot of money for the data center. So this is really an economy-driven movement to locate the data center from east to the west. I think most importantly, this is a national strategy. We have a strategy called East Data Computing West, and that's been promoted for a few years now. And the important is that if you are national strategy, the government normally will simplify the approval procedure and can also provide other support, such as network construction and also to connect the data center to the renewables. So all in all, I think that this not only an economic-driven movement, is also supported by the government.
And we hear so much about the global AI race being characterised as a chip war, but is this contest really about securing cheap and abundant energy, ideally from renewable sources?
I think that both are important. Chip is important, obviously. You need a chip to run the AI center. On the other hand, the electricity also very important. You have chip, without electricity, you cannot run. On the other hand, you don't have a good chip, you cannot run efficiently. You need to consume more energy to achieve the end results. So both are important. But I think that what important is that can you wait? The timing is really important in this case. For example, the data center require 1 to 2 years to build most. But the electricity supply normally takes longer than that. If you really have a huge electricity, most effective electricity system like China, then you can use electricity right away. But on the other hand, in the US, you have the chip, but you don't have electricity. And also you cannot wait. As I mentioned earlier, the data center 1 to 2 years. But to build a gas turbine in US, well, that's what they're doing at this moment. Nuclear is really too far away. Hydro, coal is pretty far away. It takes longer time to build. Even natural gas take at least 2 years. And it can run to 7 years based on some news on the network that say that you need to wait for the manufacturer of the turbine equipment. So all in all, you cannot wait. But I do believe that in China, the wind and solar plus energy storage can really support a data center in the US because it only takes about 6 to 10 months to build a large scale wind and solar plus energy storage, probably plus a small gas turbine. They'll be good enough. We don't need to have a very strong grip to support it. And by the way, that the grip in US is not really strong. Okay, compared to China, it's pretty far away. So I think that in this case, electricity chip is important. Electricity could be even more important for the US. But for China, I think next we have the electricity system. We have a cheap wind and solar, and also the renewables can be combined with can support the data center, can also combine with the low carbon strategy. So everything in the electricity side is advantages for China, no question about it. But the China need to support the chips to move forward.
That is Lin Boqiang, Dean of the China Institute for Studies in Energy Policy at Xiamen University, speaking with Vivian Nunes. And that wraps up this edition of Climate Watch. You can find more episodes on your favorite podcast platforms. Just search for Climate Watch and hit subscribe. Don't forget to leave us a quick review or share it with a friend. You can also email us at radio@cgtn.com with your questions or feedback. And stay updated on the latest climate stories with our Substack newsletter, Climate Choices. I'm Zhao Ying. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time.